Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here to talk to you about ways in which you can deal with depression, specifically in college. My name is Jackson Kakwenya, and I would like to begin with a story. So, growing up, my family and I depended 100% on the income of my father. This became a problem when in 2008, my father lost his job. It meant that my siblings and I had to stop going to school. I stayed for about 2 years without going to school when my cousin, who had just gotten married at the time, came to pick me up to go and live with him and continue with my education. I was in 7th grade, about to write my first national exam when we received a phone call that said my father had passed away. I was broken, but that wasn't the worst, because 6 months later, we received another phone call, and this time it was my mother who had passed away. I was hurt, broken. You could imagine things that were going on in my head. Lucky for me, I didn't manage to recover from the situation, and I continued with my education. Years passed, and I was a senior in high school when the headmaster of the school came to announce the death of our fellow student. It was reported that the student killed himself because he could not handle living life without his parents. It was reported that his parents were involved in an accident 2 weeks prior to that incident. At that point, I began to think, was there anything that could have been done to avoid this from happening? Was there any qualities that would have been instilled in the child to enable him to deal with such situations? And how did I manage to recover and he couldn't? Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, today I'll be talking to you about ways in which you can deal with depression. We'll first begin to define depression and look at some prime symptoms. Then we're going to look at some of the major effects of depression. And lastly, we're going to discuss various ways in which you can deal with depression. Let us first begin by looking at the general definition and symptoms of depression. In an article, Practice-ness by Buck in 2008, specialists in the field of mental health defined depression in various ways. In this article, she wrote, and I quote, "Depression is a complex mental health condition. It is a constant feeling of unhappiness or loneliness. Depression has no single cause. Researchers found that 1 in every 5 young people experiences depression at some point during their high school or their college life. It is reported that a number of events and occurrences can trigger depression. Some of them could be recent bereavement, like in my case and my friends. It could be relationship problems, financial problems, illness, unemployment, loss of a job, stress at work. It could be medication. It could be as a result of family history of depression." In addition to this article by Buck, I found another article by Morrell and Orores. This article was written in 2016, and it is called the Journal of Health and Human Services Administration. This journal outlines some prime symptoms of depression, and these are, but are not limited to, loss of interest in activities, insomnia or excessive sleeping, poor appetite, restlessness or irritability, persistent sadness or hopelessness, significant weight loss or weight gain, tearfulness or frequent crying, feeling of worthlessness or guilt, and thoughts of death or suicide. Ladies and gentlemen, we have looked at a general definition of depression. We've looked at some of the prime symptoms of depression. Now let us go and look at effects of depression. In an article by Milesh Thompson in 2017, called the Journal for Quality and Participation, she wrote that 33.9% of students report inability to concentrate in class activities. It was reported that this inability later affects their academic performance, which in turn affects their health system. It affects systems like the digestive system. it affects the reproductive system, and it also affects the immune system. In addition to this article, the article by Moray and O'Lawrence went a little bit deeper, looking at the effects of depression amongst adolescents. In a research conducted, they found that 15 million children in the United States of America grow up in homes where one or both parents have had an episode or two of depression. These depressed parents have difficulty in parenting. They tend to neglect their children. They avoid confrontation, which leads to children involving themselves in reckless activities like the excessive intake of alcohol, cigarette smoking, or even in drugs like marijuana, which affects their health development and mental development. In an article by Desai and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it was found that another effect of depression is suicide. And in the research conducted, suicide was found to be the second largest cause of death amongst young people. Ladies and gentlemen, we've looked at a general definition of depression. We've looked at some of the prime symptoms of depression. And now we've looked at some effects of depression. Let us now discuss some of the ways in which we can combat and deal with depression. In college students specifically, Milesh Thompson in her article, she writes that it is important that at the very beginning of a child's studies, you prepare them for stressors that they might encounter during their time in college. She suggests that having a mandatory orientation course could enable students to deal with depression. She suggests that teaching students the skill to control anxiety and stress is vital. The orientation course could be incorporated with techniques that will help students to recognize, to deal with, and to prepare for stressors that could cause depression. In the article, she suggests that incorporating discussions that will teach students time management skills, organizational skills, and also teaching students decision-making skills, involving exercises that are based on real-life scenarios. Examples of exercises, she gave a homework that tracks all class activities in one place. This will help students even as they graduate from their college. In addition to this, another article by Nimrod and colleagues finds that leisure is an important factor in dealing with depression. In this journal, they conducted a research where 48 women were questioned. 48 depressed women were questioned. These women reported that they used leisure, that leisure activities helped them in coping and recovering from depression. Leisure activities that involved self-expression, that encouraged freedom of expression, that encouraged creativity. It increased their self-efficacy and their self-motivation, which in turn reduced the risks of depression. Ladies and gentlemen, we have looked at a general definition. Ladies and gentlemen, we've discussed some symptoms, some effects, and now we've discussed the ways in which to deal with depression. Preparation at the very beginning is vital to dealing and coping with depression. As it is often said, to cut down a big tree, you need to start with the roots, which is why at the very beginning, even in our homes, spreading positivity could be vital in combating depression as a nation and as the world at large. It has been Jackson Kakwenya, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to end with a quote from one of my favorite songs, and this is by, the song is by Kamin, and it's called Shooting Star, and it says, "You are greater than what you think you are. You are meant to fly. You are meant to touch the sky." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.